Sarah and David Miller always wanted to have a big family. They lived in a nice house in a quiet neighborhood in Ohio, with a big backyard perfect for children to play in. After trying for 5 years to have their own baby, doctors told them it would be very hard for them to have children naturally. "We still want to be parents," Sarah told David one night over dinner. "Maybe adoption is our path." David agreed. He had been thinking the same thing. The couple researched adoption agencies and went to several meetings to learn about the process. They learned that there were many children waiting for homes, and they felt ready to open their hearts. On a cold January morning, they visited Bright Futures Adoption Agency. The office was small but welcoming, with pictures of happy families on the walls. Their social worker, Ms. Jenkins, was a middle-aged woman with a kind smile and 15 years of experience. "We have a little girl who needs a home," Ms. Jenkins said, showing them a photo of a 4-year-old with curly black hair and big brown eyes. "Her name is Amara. She's been in foster care for almost a year now." Sarah felt tears come to her eyes as she looked at the picture. There was something special about Amara's smile, even though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "What's her story?" David asked, also feeling drawn to the child. Ms. Jenkins explained that Amara's mother had signed away her rights shortly after Amara turned 3. The mother was very young and couldn't take care of her. There's no father in the picture. Amara is a sweet child but needs a stable home. The Millers visited Amara at her foster home the following week. She was shy at first, hiding behind her foster mother's legs. But after David showed her how to play a simple hand game, she giggled and started to open up. "Would you like to come back and play again?" Sarah asked Amara at the end of their visit. Amara nodded, her small hand holding tight to the teddy bear the Millers had brought her. Over the next 3 months, the Millers visited Amara regularly. Each time, she became more comfortable with them. They brought her to the park, read her stories, and learned about her favorite foods and colors. The adoption process moved forward, with home studies, background checks, and paperwork. "Are you sure you want to adopt a child of a different race?" Ms. Jenkins asked during one of their meetings. "It comes with unique challenges." "We've thought about it carefully," Sarah replied. "We join parent groups and read books about transracial adoption. We know we have a lot to learn, but we're committed to helping Amara connect with her culture and heritage." 6 months after their first meeting, the Millers brought Amara home. They had prepared a special bedroom for her, painted light purple, her favorite color, with star stickers on the ceiling. On her bed sat the teddy bear they had given her, along with new books and toys. The first night was hard. Amara cried for her foster family and seemed scared of her new room. Sarah sat with her until she fell asleep, singing quiet songs and promising that everything would be okay. Day by day, they built trust. Amara slowly began to feel at home. She started calling them Mom and Dad after 2 months. They enrolled her in a good preschool where she made friends quickly. Her laugh filled their home, and the Millers felt their family was finally complete. What they didn't know was that this was just the beginning of a journey that would test their love, challenge their beliefs, and reveal secrets that no one could have expected. 1 year passed since Amara joined the Miller family. She was now 5 years old and had started kindergarten at Oak Elementary School. The little girl who once hid behind her foster mother now ran into her classroom with confidence, her colorful backpack bouncing as she moved. "Bye, Mom. Bye, Dad," she called over her shoulder, already focused on finding her friends. Sarah and David smiled at each other. These simple moments made their hearts full. At home, they created new family traditions. Sunday mornings meant pancakes shaped like animals. Friday nights were for movies and popcorn on the living room floor. They took photos of everything: Amara losing her first tooth, riding a bike without training wheels, and dressed up for Halloween as a superhero. "She's thriving," Sarah told her mother on the phone. "It's like she was always meant to be with us." But being a multiracial family had its challenges too. At the grocery store, an older woman asked Sarah, "Where did you get her from?" as if Amara was an exotic pet. At the park, another child asked Amara why she didn't look like her parents. David and Sarah tried to answer these questions with patience, but they felt protective of their daughter. They joined a support group for adoptive families where they met the Washingtons, a black couple who had adopted children of various backgrounds. Lissa Washington became a close friend to Sarah, often giving advice about caring for Amara's hair and skin. "You need to find black role models for Amara," Lisa suggested during a playdate. And books with characters who look like her. The Millers took this advice seriously. They found a dance class taught by a black instructor. They filled Amara's bookshelf with stories featuring diverse characters. They celebrated Black History Month with special projects and discussions appropriate for Amara's age. When Amara turned 6, she started asking questions about her birth mother. "Did my first mommy not want me?" she asked one night as Sarah tucked her into bed. Sarah's heart broke a little. They had always been open about Amara being adopted, but explaining the complicated reasons why children need new families was difficult. "Your birth mother wanted you very much," Sarah said carefully, "but sometimes grown-ups have big problems that make it hard for them to take care of children. She made sure you would be safe and loved." Amara seemed satisfied with this answer, but the Millers knew more questions would come as she grew older. In spring, the family received a letter from the adoption agency. It was time for the annual check-in, a standard procedure for the first 5 years after adoption. Miss Jenkins, their social worker, would visit their home the following week. The day before the visit, David found an old box while cleaning the garage. Inside were the original adoption papers they had stored away. Looking through them again, he noticed something strange. Some information about Amara's background seemed different from what he remembered. The paperwork mentioned that Amara had no known relatives interested in custody, but David clearly recalled Ms. Jenkins mentioning a grandmother who couldn't care for Amara due to health issues. "Sarah," he called, "can you look at this? Something doesn't seem right." Sarah read through the papers, her forehead wrinkling with concern. "That's odd. I'm sure Ms. Jenkins told us more about Amara's family history. Maybe there's another file." They searched through their home office but found nothing else. David made a note to ask about this during tomorrow's visit. What they didn't know was that Ms. Jenkins had recently left the agency under unusual circumstances. The new social worker who would arrive tomorrow would bring information that would shake the foundation of their family, information that would change everything they thought they knew about their daughter's past. The doorbell rang at exactly 10 o'clock the next morning. Sarah smoothed her shirt and took a deep breath before opening the door. Instead of Ms. Jenkins, a younger woman with short hair and glasses stood on their porch. "Hello, I'm Tanya Rodriguez," she said, offering her hand. "I'm the new social worker assigned to Amara's case. Ms. Jenkins no longer works with our agency." This news surprised the Millers. Ms. Jenkins had been with them through the entire adoption process. "Is everything okay?" David asked as he invited Tanya into their living room. "There have been some changes at the agency," Tanya said carefully, setting her briefcase on the coffee table. "That's partly why I'm here today. Amara was at school, so the adults could speak freely." Tanya explained that the agency was reviewing all cases handled by Ms. Jenkins after discovering some irregularities in her work. "What kind of irregularities?" Sarah asked, her stomach tightening with worry. Tanya opened her briefcase and pulled out a file. "I need to ask you about the information you received regarding Amara's biological family." David mentioned the discrepancy he had noticed in the paperwork just yesterday. "We were going to ask about that, actually." Tanya nodded, looking troubled. "I'm afraid there may be more inconsistencies than that. According to our records, Miss Jenkins told you that Amara had no living relatives who could care for her. Is that correct?" "Yes," Sarah confirmed. "Except for an elderly grandmother with health problems who couldn't take care of a child." Tanya wrote something in her notebook. "And you were told that Amara's mother voluntarily gave up her parental rights when Amara was 3. "That's right," David said, a cold feeling spreading through his chest. "What's going on?" Tanya took off her glasses and rubbed her eyes. 2 weeks ago, a woman named Keisha Taylor came to our agency. She claims to be Amara's aunt, her mother's sister." The room fell silent. Sarah reached for David's hand. "That's impossible," David finally said. "We were told there were no other family members." "Miss Taylor has provided DNA evidence confirming her relationship to Amara," Tanya continued. "She says she's been searching for her niece for over 2 years." Sarah felt like she couldn't breathe. But the paperwork, the court, everything was legal. Tanya nodded sadly. The adoption itself was legal based on the information presented to the court, but it appears Ms. Jenkins may have hidden certain facts. She pulled out another document. According to Ms. Taylor, Amara's mother, Denise Taylor, never intended to permanently give up her rights. She was suffering from severe depression and agreed to temporary foster care while she received treatment. She was told she could regain custody when she was stable. David stood up and walked to the window, trying to process this information. Are you saying Ms. Jenkins lied to everyone? To us? To the court? We're still investigating, Tanya said. But yes, it appears she misrepresented the situation to fast-track certain adoptions. Sarah felt tears forming. Why would she do that? Pressure to close cases. Bonuses for successful placements. We're not sure yet, Tanya replied. What we do know is that Keisha Taylor has been looking for her niece since Denise was hospitalized. She never knew about the adoption. And Amara's mother? Sarah asked, afraid to hear the answer. She completed her treatment program over a year ago. She's been stable, working, and fighting to find out what happened to her daughter. Tanya paused. She never signed permanent surrender papers, only temporary custody forms. David returned to the couch, his face pale. What does this mean for us? For Amara? Tanya closed her file. Legally, it's complicated. But I need to tell you something else. Keisha and Denise Taylor don't want to disrupt Amara's life. They want to meet you and find a way forward that considers Amara's well-being first. As the Millers sat in stunned silence, Tanya handed them a sealed envelope. This is a letter from Denise. Before we discuss next steps, they wanted you to hear their side of the story. Sarah's hands shook as she opened the envelope. David moved closer, putting his arm around her shoulders. The letter inside was written in neat handwriting on simple lined paper. Asterisk, dear Mr. and Mrs. Miller, asterisk. Asterisk, my name is Denise Taylor. I am Amara's birth mother. I don't know what you've been told about me, but I want you to know my truth. 2 years ago, I suffered from severe postpartum depression after Amara's birth father left us. I couldn't get out of bed some days. I wasn't eating. I knew I needed help, asterisk. Asterisk, when social services got involved, I agreed to place Amara in temporary foster care while I got treatment. Ms. Jenkins promised me that once I was better, I could have my daughter back. I signed papers that I thought were for temporary custody only, asterisk. Asterisk, after 3 months of treatment, I was doing much better. When I called about getting Amara back, Ms. Jenkins said there was more paperwork and more steps. Then one day, I couldn't reach her anymore. The agency told me she was handling different cases. The new social worker couldn't find my file, asterisk. Asterisk, my sister Keisha tried to get answers too. She had offered to take Amara while I recovered, but Ms. Jenkins told her that wasn't possible. We'd been fighting for 2 years to find out what happened, asterisk. Asterisk, I don't blame you. You probably had no idea. I'm sure you've given Amara a good home, but please understand. My daughter was taken from me through lies. I never wanted to give her up forever, asterisk. Asterisk, I don't want to traumatize Amara by suddenly removing her from your home, but I want to be part of her life. She is my only child, and I've missed so much already, asterisk. Asterisk, sincerely, asterisk. Asterisk, Denise Taylor, asterisk. Sarah put down the letter, tears streaming down her face. What do we do now? David looked just as lost. I don't know. I can't even process this. Tanya gave them a moment before speaking. The agency has hired an independent investigator to review all of Ms. Jenkins' cases. So far, they've found 3 other families in similar situations. Has she been arrested? David asked, anger building in his voice. She's under investigation, Tanya replied. But our main concern right now is the children and families affected by her actions. Sarah wiped her eyes. What happens next? That depends partly on what you and the Taylors decide, Tanya explained. This could become a legal battle, with courts determining custody, or you could try to find a solution outside the courts. David stood up and paced the room. How can we know if this Denise is even stable now? How do we know what's best for Amara? We would conduct a home study and evaluation of Ms. Taylor's current situation, Tanya said. But I can tell you that she has maintained steady employment for over a year, has completed all recommended therapy, and has a support system including her sister Keisha. Sarah looked at the family photos on their wall. Amara's bright smile in her school picture. The 3 of them at the beach last summer. How could they explain this to a 7-year-old who thought her life was settled and secure? Do they want to meet Amara right away? Sarah asked. fear in her voice. They've requested a meeting with you first, Tanya said, without Amara present. They want to talk about how to handle this in a way that won't confuse or upset her. David sat back down, taking Sarah's hand. That seems reasonable. I think they genuinely care about what's best for Amara, Tanya added. They could have gone straight to court, but they chose to reach out first. When would this meeting happen? Sarah asked. They're available whenever you're ready, but I suggest not waiting too long. This situation is difficult for everyone. The Millers looked at each other, having a silent conversation with their eyes as couples often do after years together. Finally, David spoke. Tell them we can meet this weekend, at a neutral place, maybe a private room at the community center. Tanya nodded. I'll arrange it, and I'll be there to help facilitate. After she left, Sarah and David sat in silence for a long time, the letter on the table between them. The life they had built so carefully was suddenly on shaky ground. In a few hours, they would need to pick up Amara from school, smile, and act normal while their world was falling apart. No matter what happens, Sarah finally whispered, we have to put Amara first. David nodded. Always. Saturday morning came too quickly. Sarah tried 3 different outfits before settling on a simple blue dress that Amara once said made her look pretty like a sky. David wore a button-up shirt and khaki pants, more formal than his usual weekend clothes. They had arranged for their neighbor Mrs. Wilson to watch Amara during the meeting. Remember, sweetie, we'll be back in a few hours, Sarah told Amara as they dropped her off. Be good for Mrs. Wilson. Can we get ice cream when you come back? Amara asked, already distracted by Mrs. Wilson's cat. We'll see, David said, giving her an extra tight hug. The community center was a 15-minute drive away. Neither spoke during the journey, both lost in their own thoughts. They arrived early and waited in the small meeting room Tanya had reserved. The walls were a pale yellow, with a round table in the center surrounded by 6 chairs. They're here, Tanya announced, poking her head in the door at exactly 10 a.m. David stood up quickly. Sarah gripped the edge of the table, her heart pounding. The door opened wider, and 2 women walked in. The first woman was tall with short natural hair and sharp eyes that took in everything at once. She wore dark jeans and a green blouse. This must be Keisha, Sarah thought. The second woman was smaller, with the same warm brown skin tone as Amara. Her hair was in neat braids, and she wore a simple dress with a cardigan. Her eyes were exactly like Amara's, wide, dark, and expressive. There was no doubt this was Denise, Amara's birth mother. Mr. and Mrs. Miller, this is Denise Taylor and her sister Keisha Taylor, Tanya said, gesturing to each person. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of the situation seemed to fill the room, making it hard to breathe. Finally, David broke the silence. Please, sit down, and you can call us David and Sarah. The women sat across from the Millers. Tanya took a seat at the end of the table, notebook ready. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us, Denise said softly. Her voice shook slightly. I know this must be very difficult. It is, Sarah admitted. But I can't imagine how difficult it's been for you too. Keisha leaned forward. We want to be clear about something right away. We don't blame you for what happened. You were lied to, just like my sister. David nodded, some tension leaving his shoulders. We've been worried about this meeting, about what you might want. I want my daughter back, Denise said honestly, tears forming in her eyes. But I know it's not that simple. Amara has been with you for nearly 3 years. You're the parents she knows now. Tell us about Amara, Keisha suggested. What is she like? Sarah smiled to spike herself. She's amazing, so smart and funny. She loves to draw and can spend hours with her colored pencils. She's learning to read now and gets so excited when she figures out a new word. She has a stubborn streak, David added with a small laugh. Once she decides something, it's hard to change her mind. Denise wiped a tear. She was like that as a baby too, so determined. The ice began to break as they shared stories about Amara. The Millers showed photos on their phones. Denise shared memories of Amara's early years. For a brief moment, they were just people who all loved the same child. Then Tanya gently brought them back to the purpose of the meeting. We need to discuss how to move forward. There are several options, from legal proceedings to mediation to private arrangements. I don't want to traumatize my daughter by suddenly removing her from the only home she remembers, Denise said. But I also can't just walk away again. We understand, Sarah said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. Amara deserves to know her birth family, her history. What if? David hesitated, then continued. What if we start with visits? Supervised at first, then more regular if things go well? Keisha looked at her sister. Denise. Denise took a deep breath. I would be grateful for that opportunity. To get to know her again slowly. We should talk to a family therapist, Sarah suggested. Someone who can help us explain this to Amara in a way she can understand. And we'll need some kind of legal agreement, David added, to make sure everyone's rights are protected. Tanya made notes as they talked. The conversation wasn't easy, and there were moments of tension and tears. But by the end of 2 hours, they had the outline of a plan. A first step toward a future none of them had imagined before. As they prepared to leave, Denise handed Sarah a small envelope. This is for Amara, when you think she's ready. It's just a letter and a few photos of me, her grandparents, and Aunt Keisha. Sarah accepted it with care. Thank you. We'll find the right time. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings with lawyers, therapists, and social workers. Sarah and David met with Dr. Harper, a child psychologist who specialized in adoption and family transitions. They sat in her cozy office surrounded by children's books and colorful artwork. Children are resilient, Dr. Harper explained, but they need honesty and stability. We should tell Amara about her birth mother in simple terms she can understand. David nodded. How do we do that without making her feel confused or scared? We'll use age-appropriate language and emphasize that this is happening because everyone loves her, Dr. Harper said. The most important thing is that she doesn't feel caught in the middle or responsible for adult decisions. That night, after Amara went to bed, Sarah and David practiced what they would say to her. They decided to talk to her that weekend when they would have plenty of time to answer her questions and comfort her if needed. Saturday morning, they made Amara's favorite breakfast, pancakes with strawberries and whipped cream. After they ate, Sarah took a deep breath and started the conversation they had been preparing for. Amara, we want to talk to you about something important, she said gently. Amara looked up from her last bite of pancake. Am I in trouble? No, sweetheart, not at all, David assured her. This is about your family, your whole family. Remember how we told you that you grew in another mommy's tummy before you came to live with us? Sarah continued. Amara nodded. Because you couldn't grow a baby in your tummy. That's right. Well, we've learned something new. Your first mommy has been looking for you. Her name is Denise, and she misses you very much. Amara's eyes widened. She's looking for me? Like hide and seek? David smiled at her innocent comparison. Kind of, but for a long time. There was a mix-up with some grown-up paperwork, and she couldn't find you. But now she has. Does she want me to go away with her? Amara asked, her lip trembling slightly. Sarah quickly pulled Amara onto her lap. No, sweetie. You're staying right here with us. But Denise would like to meet you and get to know you. She and her sister. That's your aunt. Would like to be part of your life. Like Jasmine at school? She has 2 houses, Amara said, trying to understand. Not exactly, David explained. You'll still live here with us, but sometimes you might visit Denise, kind of like you visit Grandma and Grandpa. They showed Amara the pictures Denise had shared. She studied them carefully. She looks like me, Amara said, pointing to Denise's face. She does, Sarah agreed, her heart aching and healing at the same time. You have her eyes and her smile. They answered Amara's questions as best they could. Some were easy. Does she like ice cream too? Others were harder. Why didn't she keep me? They followed Dr. Harper's advice, keeping answers simple and emphasizing that everyone wanted what was best for her. A week later, they arranged the first meeting at Dr. Harper's office. Sarah helped Amara pick out a special outfit and fixed her hair with the pretty barrettes she loved. Amara was quiet on the drive there, holding tight to her favorite stuffed rabbit. It's okay to feel nervous, David told her. We're all a little nervous. When they arrived, Dr. Harper met them in the waiting room. Denise is already here. She's nervous too, so let's all take some deep breaths together. They followed Dr. Harper to a playroom with toys, books, and comfortable chairs. Denise stood as they entered, her eyes immediately finding Amara. For a moment, no one moved. "Hello, Amara," Denise said softly. "I'm so happy to see you." Amara looked up at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. Then she took a small step forward. "Hi," she said shyly. "I like your earrings. They're sparkly." Denise touched her star-shaped earrings and smiled. "Thank you. I wore them special today because I knew I was going to meet you." Dr. Harper suggested they start with a simple activity. "Amara, would you like to show Denise how you build with these blocks?" Slowly, the ice began to break. Amara showed Denise how to build a tower, and they talked about favorite colors and animals. The adults watched carefully, ready to step in if needed, letting the connection unfold naturally. By the end of the hour, Amara was telling Denise about her school and friends. As they prepared to leave, Denise asked if she could give Amara a hug. "That's up to you, Amara," Sarah said. Amara thought for a moment, then nodded. The hug was quick but real. As they walked to the car afterward, Amara asked, "Can we see her again?" Sarah and David exchanged glances over her head. It was just one meeting, but it was a start. The road ahead would not be easy, but they were taking the first steps. Over the next 3 months, the visits between Amara and Denise became more regular. They started with short meetings at Dr. Harper's office, then moved to trips to the park and children's museum. By summer, Amara was spending Saturday afternoons at Denise and Keisha's apartment. "Aunt Keisha taught me to braid hair," Amara announced one evening, proudly showing Sarah the colorful beads at the end of her braids. "She says next time she'll teach me how to do it myself." Sarah smiled, though her heart felt a small pinch. These were things she couldn't teach Amara herself, but she was grateful that Amara now had people in her life who could share these cultural connections. Meanwhile, the legal situation grew more complicated. The Millers' lawyer, Mr. Peterson, called them in for a meeting in late July. "The investigation into Ms. Jenkins has uncovered more problems," he explained in his downtown office. "She falsified documents in at least 12 cases, including Amara's." David leaned forward in his chair. "What does that mean for our adoption?" Mr. Peterson sighed. "Technically, it means the adoption could be challenged in court. The proper procedures weren't followed to terminate Denise's parental rights." "Could we lose Amara?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's possible," Mr. Peterson admitted. "But courts generally consider what's in the best interest of the child. Amara has been with you for 3 years. That counts for a lot." "But Denise is her biological mother, and she was wronged by the system," David pointed out. "Yes, and she's now stable and involved in Amara's life," the lawyer agreed. "Have you discussed custody arrangements with her directly?" Sarah and David looked at each other. They had been so focused on making the visits work that they hadn't addressed the bigger legal questions. That night, after Amara was asleep, they talked for hours about what to do. "I can't imagine not having Amara in our lives," Sarah said, tears in her eyes. "But I also can't ignore that Denise is her mother too." "And she's good with Amara," David added. "We've seen that ourselves." They decided to do something unusual. Instead of fighting in court, they would invite Denise to discuss a shared custody arrangement. Mr. Peterson warned them that such arrangements were complicated, but they felt it was the right path forward. The meeting took place at Mr. Peterson's office. Denise brought her own lawyer, Ms. Carter. The conversation was tense at first. "I want to be clear," Denise said. "I never gave up my rights willingly. That was stolen from me." "We understand that," Sarah replied. "And we're not trying to keep Amara from you. We just want to find a solution that's best for her." After hours of discussion, they reached an agreement that surprised everyone. Amara would continue to live primarily with the Millers, but would spend every other weekend and 1 month in summer with Denise. Both families would share legal decision-making for education and medical care. Most importantly, they would work together as a team to support Amara. "This isn't a typical arrangement," Mr. Peterson cautioned. "The courts might not approve it." "Then we'll make it work without the courts," David said firmly. "This is about Amara, not legal technicalities." The most difficult part was explaining the new arrangement to Amara. They sat her down in the living room one evening after dinner. "Remember how you visit Denise on Saturdays?" Sarah began. "Well, soon you'll get to stay overnight sometimes too, like a sleepover." Amara's eyes widened. Will I have my own room there? Yes, David said. Denise and Aunt Keisha are preparing a special room just for you. Amara considered this. But I'll still live here too, right? With you and Molly? She asked, referring to their cat. Absolutely, Sarah assured her. This house is still your home. You'll just have two homes now, with people who love you in both places. Amara nodded, seeming to accept this explanation. Can I bring Rabbit with me? She asked, referring to her stuffed toy. Of course, David said, relieved that her questions were practical rather than emotional. That weekend, they helped Amara pack a small suitcase for her first overnight stay with Denise. Sarah included Amara's favorite pajamas, books, and of course, Rabbit. As David carried the suitcase to the car, he noticed Sarah standing in Amara's doorway, looking at the room with a mixture of sadness and hope. We're doing the right thing, he said, putting his arm around her. I know, she replied. It's just not what I expected when we became parents. The best families, David said, aren't always the ones we imagine. They're the ones we build together, even when it's hard. 1 year had passed since the Millers and Denise Taylor agreed to their unique family arrangement. Today was Amara's 8th birthday, and both families gathered at the local park to celebrate. Sarah and David arrived early to set up tables under a large oak tree. They spread a colorful tablecloth and arranged presents while David hung balloons. Do you think we have enough food? Sarah asked, looking at the trays of sandwiches and fruit. Between your cooking and what Denise is bringing, we could feed the whole neighborhood, David laughed. At noon, Denise and Keisha arrived with more food and decorations. What might have been awkward a year ago now felt almost normal as the adults worked together to create a special day for Amara. I made her favorite mac and cheese, Denise said, placing a large container on the table, and Keisha baked the cake. Perfect, Sarah replied. Amara will be so excited. My mother is bringing her at 1 o'clock. She thinks they're just having lunch at the park. When Amara arrived, her eyes grew wide seeing both her families together with balloons, presents, and her friends from school waiting to surprise her. Happy birthday, everyone shouted. Amara ran to hug Sarah and David first, then Denise and Keisha. This is the best surprise ever, she exclaimed. The party was everything an 8-year-old could want. There were games, delicious food, a beautiful cake, and plenty of presents. But the best gift wasn't wrapped in colorful paper. It was seeing all the people Amara loved getting along and celebrating together. Excuse me, she said quietly. David stood up protectively. Yes, we are. Can we help you? The woman twisted her hands together. My name is Rebecca Wilson. I adopted a little boy through Bright Futures Adoption Agency 3 years ago, with Ms. Jenkins as our social worker. Sarah and Denise exchanged glances, immediately understanding the significance. Ms. Rodriguez from the agency gave me your names, Rebecca continued. She said you might understand what I'm going through. We just found out our son's father never knew about him, and now he wants to be involved. Why don't you sit down? Denise offered kindly. We know exactly what you're going through. As Amara played nearby with her last remaining friends, the adults shared their story with Rebecca, the shock, the pain, and the difficult journey to create a new kind of family. It was the hardest thing we've ever done, Sarah admitted. But look at Amara now. She's thriving with all of us in her life. Rebecca wiped away tears. I'm so scared of losing my son, but hearing your story gives me hope that maybe we can find a solution too. The most important thing, David said, is to put your son first. That's what helped us make decisions when things got tough. By the time Rebecca left, she had their phone numbers and the name of Dr. Harper, who had helped them through the transition. That evening, Amara had one more surprise. Both families had worked for months on a special gift, a beautiful memory book that told the story of Amara's life, including both her birth family and her adoptive family. There were photos of her as a baby with Denise, pictures from her years with the Millers, and new photos of all of them together. This is your story, Sarah explained as they sat together on the couch. It's more complicated than some stories, but it's also more special. Because I have 2 moms? Amara asked, turning the pages with care. Yes, Denise replied. And because so many people love you. Amara studied a page that showed a timeline of her life. What about other kids like me? With 2 families? The adults exchanged glances. This was something they had discussed recently. Actually, David said, "We're going to help other families like ours." The judge who approved our custody agreement thought our situation could help change how these cases are handled. Indeed, the case had drawn attention from family courts and adoption agencies. What had started as a personal tragedy had grown into something larger, a model for how to put children's needs first when adoptions were challenged. Later that night, after the celebrations were over, Anamara was asleep at the Miller's home. She would spend the following weekend with Denise. Sarah found a small note in her purse. It was from Denise. Asterisk, thank you for sharing your daughter with me, for letting me be her mother too. What began as our greatest pain has become our greatest blessing. D asterisk. Sarah showed the note to David, who pulled her close. Outside Amara's room, they could hear her soft breathing, peaceful and secure, surrounded by all the love her unusual family could give. The story that began with shock and pain had transformed into something beautiful, a reminder that families come in many forms, but the best ones are built on love, respect, and the courage to put a child's needs above all else.